Hello and welcome back. It's good to see you here again. Today's the last painting that I'm going to be doing on our Skye trip. It was a great adventure, that Skye trip, and we saw a lot. We experienced a lot as well, mainly weather, but some beautiful sights as well. And today we're going to have a go at a panoramic painting, something a bit different. I don't normally do panoramic paintings, but I quite like them from time to time. They really give a wide field of view, which is quite fun, and they fit in unusual places in the home as well, which I quite enjoy. We went to Broadford twice in our trip. The first day it was gloomy, really gloomy, and on our return journey it was a beautiful day. So this is the contrast between the two. And we found this wonderful scene, this harbour scene, which was looking east towards the mainland, and it was really nice, and I really thought it was worthy of a nice painting. The last painting I did of Nice Point was really satisfying. I really enjoyed that painting, and I think partly what's so great about it was the size of it. It's something really thrilling when you do a big painting, and there's a real sense of achievement when you finish it. I liked it so much that I did another little sketch of it, an oil painting of it, which is this one here, and I was really quite excited by that one as well. It was a nice colourful picture, and it sort of demonstrates the differences between oil painting and watercolour painting. Watercolour painting is all about lightness of touch and clarity, but oil paintings are much more heavy medium where the colours are so much richer, but both have their satisfying elements to it, and I enjoy both mediums. So here's the drawing done, and yeah, I was pleased with the drawing. I thought it had a lot going on from left to right in the picture, which is what's important in a panoramic painting. You don't want all the action on the right. You want to even out the action, really. So yeah, I was pleased with that. It took about 10 minutes or so to do, so not very long. Right, so now it comes to working out really where I'm going to start, and it's always really at the top of the painting, but I have to sit and think a bit from time to time, really, just to work out what I'm going to do with the sky. One of the interesting parts of Scottish mountains is that there's often cloud coming over the sky, and that's what I'm going to try and do here, to try and soften this line just in this part here where the cloud's going over the top of it. So that's always an interesting challenge. Right, so here goes. I'm going to be using a bit of ultramarine blue. Mix it up. Again, always mix up these washes very thoroughly, of pure colour. You don't want any big lumps lying in it. And then I'm going to do it cobalt blue. Mix that up thoroughly. Find a bit more water in there. Keep mixing it. Wash the brush. And then a bit of Viridian. I love Viridian in the skies. All right, there we go. Good lump of Viridian there. And probably last of all, a little bit of burnt umber. I'll put that there. And that just darkens off the blue, really. Right, okay, so have a little think about it. Oh, one last colour as well. I'm going to use a little bit of raw sienna, and I pop that there. So those are my individual colours placed on my palette there, which is an unusual technique. I don't really see many people doing that. I'll take a deep breath and have a little thought about it, and here we go. So a bit into the ultramarine blue, and then add a little bit of brown to the top corner. So it just looks a little bit stormy on this side, I think. And then I'm going to go a little bit more pure blue. This is ultramarine blue. It's fine. Now I'm going to go to a bit of cobalt blue. Pop a bit there in. Maybe get a little bit darker at the top. Make sure you mix it up carefully. Okay. Now this is where it's going to get tricky, where I'm trying to get the clouds coming in now. So perhaps a little bit, let's clean the brush. I saw a big lump of blue there. Clean the brush a bit. Right, and soften a bit so the clouds feel like they're coming in. I'll go over that again later. And then I'm going to add some green to this side. Okay, that's a good start, I hope. Right, Next part of it is to try and introduce the clouds to it. So a little bit of raw sienna, perhaps, to it, just to give that little variation, really. So I want to keep the tops of the cloud, so the white lining of the cloud in. Okay, over to here. Trying to just get a little bit of variations, softer variations in it. Yeah, that's okay. And then we're going to head down, a bit of cobalt blue into some mountain, which I'm going to go over slightly. It's always a question of thinking far enough ahead with this. You really got to think ahead. Okay, and then what this colour here, a bit of Viridian. Darken off this part. Okay, that's okay. And now I'm going to lighten off this part, a light wash here. So you can see I'm popping in a bit of variation in the sky, really. I'm not trying to paint it as one wash. One thing I did do before I started to paint is really think through it in my mind what I'm going to do. So I'm following, in my mind, I'm following a plan. It's not random. It may look like I'm sort of dashing it down, but I'm really not. I've thought very carefully about it. The next part of it is to block in the hills quickly as well, as I'm working down into them. So I'm going to start in the very distant hills, right on the left. So a little bit of cobalt blue there, and maybe a tiny bit of Viridian, of alizarin crimson, just to redden it up slightly. And let's get these in. Remember, the blue's always a bit of cerulean blue as well. The blues are always because of aerial perspective, the hills in the distance are always a little bit bluer. So I'll make them properly blue. And then change the colour again to more of a ultramarine. There we go, those distant hills. Okay, and here as well. Okay, which I will add more to later. Now we come to the nearer hills, so I'm going to warm those up with a burnt umber, just to give it the sense that it's nearer. But again, I will change that colour. Okay. And change it up again. Maybe to a raw sienna colour right at the very end. It does actually change colour, the hills. Lots of different plants on them. Okay. Need to soften that line because I don't really want a line. I want the feeling that the clouds are going over the top of that. Okay. Now a sort of raw umber for the base. A bit of burnt umber too. Okay, there we go. I've let the sky dry for a little bit. It might be a little bit too early to put it on, the second layer. And I'm trying to get a sort of dark fingers of cloud coming in there, slightly covering this part here, and then stretching out like fingers into this area here. So there's not much sky to paint, so I need to be cautious here because I don't want to overdo the sky. I don't want to make the sky dominant and too much. So it's going to be burnt umber and ultramarine blue. It's a bit too much. Okay. Right. Always a bit concerning this stage of it. Right. Okay. So little fingers that are coming across into the scene. So trying to make it seem like they've come over the hill, which is so common in Scotland. These clouds roll over the hills constantly. So then I want to expose those hills. I want the next set of hills to be more normal, so that I haven't lost the line of the hill. Now that's okay. It's caution with this. You can't overdo this one, otherwise you're really dicing with problems. And I'll put something up here as well. Always a bit cautious. So what I might do here is just soften this line here, and let it fade away a bit. A lot of painting is about hard lines and soft lines and trying to work it out. Now there's a bit of movement here, and I've got to work out whether it's something I want or something I don't want. So at the moment I like that. Complete accident. I didn't mean to do that, but it's just the way it went. And part of watercolor is to look at things and saying, is it good or is it bad? If it's good, leave it. So I'm going to try leaving that. So I'm just going to soften a few bits up here, just to get some more interesting effects on it. And then going further into the distance here, maybe I'm going to add some darker effects up higher in the sky. So up here, just to give that a little bit more of something. Skies are such interesting things to paint. There's this. I'm slightly using a photograph to see what it is, but I don't really try and copy it too much. I'm not interested in sort of. It's very much a feeling that I have for it rather than any specific photograph. I look at the balance of it. I look and see whether it's right. Does it fit in with the picture or not? So not trying to copy. Now I'm going to go over to the other side, and that needs a bit of something added to it. So I'm going to green that off. And I quite like the variation in colour that it gives. So a bluer side and a browner side. I quite like that. Yeah, something like that. The next part is to working down again the picture. I've got this basic wash on here for the clouds, and now I'm going to go into it again to provide a little bit of extra interest. So the light's coming from the left, so these hills I'm going to give a bit of a darker wash on one side of it. So maybe, and change the colour as well. A bit of red in here as well. Just trying to get the variety going. So those are the way distant hills. And then they change a bit. They become a little bit nearer. So I'm going to change the colour, make it a little bit bluer. And those are going in here. See, great massive change there in colour. So I'm going to have that spreading all the way across. How about that? I'll work into the hills now and or the mountain behind here. Now I've got this really interesting mark here which I want to maintain, so that's something I'm trying to keep at the back of my mind all the time. One of the best phrases I've ever come across in painting was from Degas, or Degas, however you want to pronounce it. And he had a wonderful phrase, and he said, in order to do a good painting, you must have the cunning of a bank robber. And I think he's right with that. It was a wonderful phrase, and it's something I always remembered. So I'm going to add a bit more brown into this now, and there's a lot of sort of pine, I think, on this hill. So I'm going to try and introduce that, trying to keep that light in there, which is so important. Hopefully I've managed that. Change the colour again. It was quite dramatic on that. Okay. Always trying to keep the drama going, because these mountains in particular, the light and the dark, that's all very important. And then the little hills. Okay. Trying to work out so it goes a little bit redder, so a little bit of brown this side. So the colours sort of merging together all the time on this. So the dark colour coming across. And then working down into the nearer distance, which is basically the trees, I think. So maybe put something in that. Lots of variation in colour. Lots of trees, lots of houses in the distance, which I'll try and include later on. Again, I've only used one brush so far, and this is my my Winsor & Newton mop. I'm trying to read the number, but my eyesight's not that good these days. I think it's 13mm. The next part I'm going to work at is going to be the sea. And one of the really interesting parts of this, and is one of the difficulties of painting in the studio, is the photographs I've got, the sea changes colour hugely. Whether that's because of technical problems with the camera or I don't know, but this is one of the advantages of painting from life, in that it's real. The colours are real, and you know that when you see a colour, you know that it's real. You know it's not a mistake of the camera. So I'm going to go into the sea, and to me there's two choices. There's like a redder, darker, bluer sea, or a lighter, greener sea, and I prefer the lighter, greener sea. So here goes. So Viridian and ultramarine blue. So I'm trying to keep my head out of the way. Apologise if I keep on doing that, but I have to stretch in abnormal ways to get across the paper. Right, that's okay. So see, that's a bluey green, and I'm going to make it a bit more of a yellowy green now. Over this way. See, it's slightly changed. Now get back to a bluer green. Yeah. So changing the colour a bit. I like things to change colour, but not necessarily like a rainbow. Cobalt blue now. I'll try a bit of cobalt blue. Yeah, just a change of colour there. That's quite nice, I thought. Blue over here. It's quite a wide piece of paper that, so Tan is going to be struggling with the camera, going from left to right. So there's a few technical problems or technical issues with painting a very big painting, is that the camera has to pan from left to right. Okay, now I'm going to work down into this part. I quite like that colour. It's a sort of muted sea colour. Now I'm going to make it a little bit bluer as it comes in towards me. Changing the colour. Yeah, that's nice. So if you have a go at one of these paintings or landscape painting, planning is a really important part of it. Before I started, as I mentioned earlier, before I started this painting, I sat down quietly and developed a plan of attack. How am I going to do this? When I get here, what am I going to do? And that's essential. If you know sort of something, if you know how you're going to go about something in the future, it just makes it a little bit easier. So I'm working a bit like a typewriter. So I don't want the paint to splurge. Cauliflower, that's the word. I don't like that particularly. So you've got to keep the paper at the same dampness all the way through. So what I'm going to do now is this area all the way along here, there are lots of houses and things like that. So I think now's the time to give that a go, or to give some of it a go anyway. So there's lots of, I've changed my brush to a much smaller brush, and I'm just going to try and introduce a few sort of gives the feeling that there's something there without overdoing it. One of the things about watercolour painting is it's much better to underdo than overdo. So I'm just trying to get a little bit of action going on. It goes into the distance here. And then where the land meets the sea, it's a little bit darker. So a sort of thinnish line in places going along here. See that? One or two islands they've got over here too, so I'll put that too much there. Yeah, so that's given an interesting effect. Now let's try and put a few trees in. A sense of trees. So basically value studies. I'm not trying to copy everything. Hinting is always an important part of painting. I want to hint at things rather than describe them perfectly. And Van Gogh had an interesting comment that he made about trees in particular. Because he painted a tree in an incredibly basic way. And he said, well, you can have a tree which every leaf and every bit of detail is done, or you can have a tree like mine. When I paint my tree, I've done it in a very short time, but everyone knows it's a tree, and we recognize it as a tree. You don't have to have huge detail to recognize it's a tree. I thought that was a great comment. I'm going to add a little bit more now to the background hills, so maybe a little bit of a shadow coming in, just to give it a sense that there's something going on there as well. Action again. I like action in pictures. Maybe that's right. Maybe soften a bit as well. Softening is an important part. So back into the sea now, and you can see it's dried, and it's dried a little bit lighter. And now we need to bring in some of the contrast back into the sea. There are sort of shadows of the sky and the clouds scudding by. That's what I want to try and imagine. There wasn't too much of it on the day, but I like the effect of it. I like to see clouds and the movement of clouds. So let's try and work on something like that. Again, the viridian, the ultramarine blue, maybe a bit of cerulean blue as well. So let's try something over here. That wasn't quite right. Let's give that sense of something going on, which is so important. Bit of viridian. That's a much greener one, so I need a foil to that, so a little bit of a bluer one, bluer mark. Slightly bigger brush, go back to my big Raphael brush. And because it's gone so green there now, I'm going to change the colour to a bit of a blue. See that? So that was an ultramarine blue, and I thought it just helped it a bit. Stopped it being a green sea. Lots of little waves, and I'm trying to simply indicate. So you see that it's green and then it goes to a bluer shade. So we're going to carry on working at the sea and working down into the nearer harbour. And here, that's very blue that bit, but I quite like it. As long as it's not, don't do too much of that, it's all right. And then the sort of waves take over coming into the harbour, where they're coming in at an angle. Don't know. This is where this, like, you can see the paper cockling now because it's so wet. But that's where this the system of boards I use are so good, because it's really keeping it firmly down. So, a bit darker. It's a darker part of the sea here, where it hits the wall. I'll put in quickly. So the sort of waves sort of change direction somehow, so I'm not sure how I'm going to do that. I think that's too much. Always, if you make a mistake, you can always soften it off again. So the next important part now is the pier, and that's really the central theme of this painting. Every painting has a central theme, and this is it. And it's an interesting structure. It's quite dark in the photographs, but I don't think it was that dark in real life, so I'm going to lighten it up a bit. And it's got some people on there as well. So let's start. I'm going to be raw sienna, and that's going to be the top. Maybe a little bit of blue. That's going to be the top of it here. So pop that in, and that will give it the where the walkway is. Maybe a little bit of brown as well. Okay, so that's the top section in. And now we're going to head down lower. So a bit of burnt umber and ultramarine blue. Gives it that sense of depth. Try to paint around the boat. Okay. Keep going with that. Yeah. The question on my mind is how dark to make it. I don't want to make it too dark. I don't like too many blacks in the painting. One of my favourite photographers, a chap called Henri Cartier-Bresson, in his printing, he didn't like black much. He just didn't like things to be too black, and he didn't have black anywhere in his prints. Not that he printed himself; he got someone else to do it. So I'm going to be doing these outcrops of rocks that go into the sea here. They're quite pretty. They sort of extend. So that's a little mix of burnt umber and ultramarine blue. And I think it needs to be a little bit more brown as well in places. Yeah, just to give the sense of a little spit of land going into it. Now I'm going to do the walkway. So a few colours here, maybe a little bit of green, because there's grass appearing in the scene now, but I don't want to do too much because it's quite a strong coloured green. Be more cautious with that. And see how the spits of land go into the rest of the land. I'm going back into the wall now, and it's sort of a darker section here. I don't think I want to make it black, but it's certainly darker. And it's sort of I want to create the sense that there's a walkway on top now. And then underneath where it hits the water, let's make that a bit blue. You've got to have some sort of transition area at the bottom here, where you can see it hits the sea. The next part is the completely unpainted part of the bottom right-hand corner, and quite a complicated area really, because you've got things on top of things. But that's always very interesting. The shoreline really, and it's a sort of stone that's on. It's not a sandy beach by any means. So let's try and make it a little bit dirty colour really. So a little bit of brown, a little bit of blue, and maybe a bit of raw sienna. Let's try that. Yeah, so dirty, it's not a nice colour. And that goes into the... Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that colour. And it does vary quite a lot. Maybe a bit browner. And the shore comes in here as well. And finishes off there. So this is probably just the first coat really, just to give it a little bit of tone. So you've got quite a hard edge here. Maybe that's too hard, so I'm going to soften that off. So imagine the tides coming in. So it's time to work on the boats now, the sort of finishing touches. You can see with the painting, most of it's sort of done now. The bulk of it is there, all the shades are there. So now it's going up the pyramid a little bit. If you can remember, quite a long time ago, I talked about the pyramid, where you do the base first. So this is what this is the base. So I'm really 3/4 of the way up the pyramid now, and the brushes are getting smaller. So to begin with, big brush, and then finishing off with the little brushes. Right, so I'm trying to get the boats done now. And again, I wanted to pick these simply as I can. So it's really a very easy value sketch. So just trying to get the shape, the basic shapes of the boats in. So one plane there, another plane. So it's planes that I'm interested in, planes of colour. Yep, and a sort of reddy colour underneath for the plimsoll line. There. So just a few details, just to pick things, just to pick up things really. I don't want to paint with detail. I just want to give the impression that that's a boat and no more than that. So that's that one. I'll add a bit of something else later on as well. It's a bit rusty, this boat. At the bottom. Had a hard life. And then has a blue top, so that's ultramarine blue and a bit of burnt umber. So one line. The back of the boat. Then I'm going to have a lighter wash for the turret, or the what do they call the cockpit? Not really a turret. There we go, the cockpit. This was just at the coming into spring, or was spring, so they're out of the water, and I guess they're just about to be cleaned because they've had a hard winter there. I think Skye in winter times are a very bleak place. The west coast is really quite a hard place to live in the winter. So you can see I'm not going into much detail, and that's one of the tricks with this. You don't want to go into much detail. I don't know whether you can see with that. I've just hinted at a few things, and suddenly it looks like a boat. It's quite amazing, really. Very satisfying part of watercolour painting, or impressionist painting really, because I do the same thing in oil. It goes back to that Van Gogh saying, you can tell it's a tree, even though it's simply painted. Really fascinating phrase. There's more of a yellow boat, yellow onto it. And then the nearest boat is red. Everything's slightly dirty colour. Yeah, okay, that's a good first layer on them. So a few more marks for the shore, and that will do that. So just to give it the sense that there is something going on. Maybe the shadow underneath the boat would be quite good. Shadow here, shadow against the wall. Give it the sense that something's going on. It's amazing how much I do invent things in painting as well. I'm not a slave to the photograph. And that's a really interesting lesson about not being a slave to the photograph, because it's so easy to become that. Painting from photographs, I think It's very good. I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do, but I think it makes you dependent on photographs, and you don't really want to be dependent on them. But if you cables or whatever, lots of things that are associated with boats. Okay, now I'm going to change my brush to a smaller brush. It's a bit too small, and I'm going to do the roof of the house, which I think is one of the most important parts of the whole painting, this roof here. So it's going to be darkish here. And then the side of the building, which I'll do in a brown here. And maybe slightly lighter here. Right, okay, that looks good. So I'll go over that again in a minute. Right, so there are vans in the picture here, but I'm not going to include those. I sort of get rid of those. But there's a little tree here, which I think would be quite nice, going up over the water. And that's quite an effective thing. Part of their garden. Yeah, I think that's helped it. So I've had a look at the sea, and I'm just going to give it a little bit of a punch up, really, because there are sort of lanes in the sea where I guess there's different currents coming in. So I'm going to try and depict that, and a question of being bold, really, and giving it a go. So there's that. So it's just like a change of colour, almost. Maybe it's a current in the sea. I don't know. There you go. Just sort of break it up a bit. It was a little bit too pale for my taste. I think that helped it. Maybe here as well. It's always a question of taste, really, and whatever you feel like is important to make decisions on, and trust yourself too. There are a few rocks in the distance which I'm going to put in here, just a sliver coming out. I think that's quite fun. So there's sort of land behind there, which I thought was nice. Okay, that definitely helped things. Now it's just a question of details. Trees, adding the trees. There are houses in the back here, so I'm going to give some of those a go. So now my little brush again, and these interesting signs that are on the pier. So one there, one there. I will go over it with a bit of white paint in a minute. That was a bit wet. Coming to the fun part now, which is just the touching and finishing off stages. So got my white paint out, and I'm just going to bring out certain parts of the boats, and just generally changing things around a little bit, not too much. Just little details that I think help it. So got the top of the boat here. I quite enjoy the white paint part of it. Yeah, that's nice. Maybe a sail here as well. You've got these interesting colour, the life preserver, which is great. Here, maybe add a bit of yellow to it. Just these little details, they're so worth it. They sort of bring the whole story together again. So a little bit of different colours there as well. A bit of yellow maybe will give it that orangey feel. And then there's a sort of danger sign here, right there. There are a couple of people, or 3 people, above here, and I think that's nice. It gives scale, and I like people in pictures. Well, some people don't like it, but I like people in pictures. They add something to it. Right, so just very, very simply, you don't want to overdo this. If you overdo people, it's a really bad thing. Give it the sense of them. Not too much colour. There's 2 people there. I think that's probably enough. I'm very minimalist when it comes to people. I've learned through experience, really, that you don't really want to put too much into it. There we go. Putting the little red boy in, which is nice, here. And maybe a yellow one over here. Maybe here. There's one here. And one here. Just randomly putting them in. I think that'd be nice. So a few touches of white paint on the houses here. I quite like the white of this roof. A touch of white here. And then we have the houses in the distance. There are lots of houses in the distance, and they have a lot of whiteness on them too. Does that look like houses? I think it does. Enough. They go up the hill a bit as well, so maybe contrast it within this darker section. That would bring them out. I'm going to add a white boat really in the distance here, as I think that will enliven something over here really. Get a couple of boats here. Maybe one. So I try and contrast it with a darkish patch, just so it gives it a sense, well, it gives it contrast really. And I'll add a base to it. That. Hopefully that seems a bit darker. Hopefully that'll seem like a boat. Just to add something into this area here, because it's quite plain really. I'm looking at the painting now, and I might put a few lines in just to give it a sense of 3 dimensions, and just to add maybe a little bit of sense of detail to it. I quite like, not every picture is like that, but some pictures are. Maybe a few marks here. I think round here particularly, you've got these cables that which they would be, loads and loads of those of them. Waves coming in, distance, buildings here. Give that a nice, see that dark edge there, that really needed that. Huge lump of white paint there. Maybe add a few sort of marks around these, just to try and indicate maybe that's a house there. So the last thing to do now is to sign it. So, James Potter. There we go. So here's the painting all framed up. I had a frame handy, so that was convenient to show it off a bit better. It always improves a picture when you frame it. I don't know what it is, but it just brings it to life. It's amazing. So there's the painting, and I'm pretty pleased with it. So I was quite pleased with the clouds coming over the mountains. It's such a common effect in Scotland, there being lots of clouds really. So that was a nice effect. And this is Waterloo, the little hamlet of Waterloo in the distance there. So yeah, the panoramic sketches or painting is always different as well. It has such a different feel to it, and so this is no exception. The size of it is 28 by 10 inches. So it's basically a full imperial sheet cut in half. So I normally get two of these paintings out of a full imperial sheet. So yeah, I enjoyed that. So that comes to the end of our little trip to Skye. It was really good fun, and the paintings are really memorable, I find. When you do a painting from a trip, which I hope you do, those paintings become more special because you really have a close attachment to it. So hopefully you can get out there and do some of those paintings when you go on holiday next or go somewhere interesting. They do mean much more to you. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and again, you learned something. That's the most important thing, that you learned something. Even if you pick up one tip, that's good enough. That's good enough to keep your enthusiasm going and want to try things. And I think the biggest weapon that you've got in watercolour painting and learning to paint in watercolour is enthusiasm. And if you've got that, you're almost there, and just keep on going. Anyway, great to see you, and thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. If you could give a thumbs up, that would be really handy. Thumbs up is such an important thing on YouTube. And you can sign up and follow me if you can too. Anyway, I'll stop blabbing. Thanks very much, and goodbye.